we're back here, and oh man, there's mosquitoes everywhere.
Back to the fairy tale, back to the show.
Yep,
Southeast Asia. There's mosquitoes everywhere.
correct. There are, and I had to turn the fan off so it won't get on the mic. But yeah, we're back here today. It's a few days later since the last video, so but this is part 2 of the whole big ol' VIZ slideshow thing that we've been cooking up. So just to recap, I'm Saito-kun, your host and the main brainstormer of this here presentation, and these two with me are Coffee and JJ returning.
Hey.
And we're here to continue back with our previous points. So where we left off this last time, so previously we talked about all the stuff about the RWBY style and other core pillars of RWBY's development, and now we're gonna get into the weeds of more towards the art direction and the design pillars, which are on screen right now. And so just to go through this again, I'll be kind of reading off the slides, and then if our illustrious guests have anything to say, they can add it in. So to start off, for the design pillars, the following will be a breakdown of my own personal take on RWBY's visual and design direction for its production, namely for mainline series. So what is kind of expected from a main RWBY series. And my goal is to emphasize RWBY's main strengths as a concept, while considering its core appeal and the basic tropes its setting is most known for. So we'll have a few points here in a breakdown, celebrating artistry, Sci-Fantasy Fusion, and all these that we'll be going through them one by one with examples. So without wasting more time, we'll go right into the first part, which is to celebrate artistry. So RWBY was a celebration of many fields of art, character design, costume design, animation, 3D modeling, music, sound design, and all of them working together to make this one big thing. And this is related to a previous point I made about how it was connected to Monty himself, who was a fan of all these different mediums of art, and how he kind of wove them into RWBY itself and was very connected to those fan bases. So part of the reason series like Arcane or Spider-Verse, which we mentioned in the previous stream, are so well loved is because of the sheer artistry of those series. Every frame in Arcane is like a painting, while the Spider-Verse movies feel like comic panels come to life. However, RWBY does not have to reach the same level of insane polish and perfection as those two, and I don't think that's entirely possible at all with its current state, but it does need to carry that same passion to not only tell a story, but not just a story, but its story that it's suited for, and to create a rich experience for its audience through sound and visuals. So, as JJ has impressed before, the key is not to have better graphics or super painted looking 3D models, but rather a careful attention to detail regarding RWBY's characters, the world they live in, and the kind of media that it wants to be a love letter to. So it has to be very specific. What I mean by attention to detail is the fact that within RWBY, as it was under Rooster Teeth, so volumes 1 through 9, there has been, yes, visual polish and good production value, in the sense that the models and the actual show itself started looking nicer. There's less janky elements and all that, but I did find that it did lack a certain attention to detail at points, and by that I don't mean that attention to detail in terms of the models or the backgrounds, but more towards the story of RWBY and the kind of world it wants to portray. And this is very clear in certain volumes where we really don't know much about the world of RWBY in the way that it wants to portray itself. So we know it's a world about hunters fighting Grim with all these cool weapons, and yet we never see any really like large amounts of professional hunters. We only really see Crow and Maria and some others, but there's no really a sense of place for where the main characters are in the world. We don't see much of different fighting styles and weapons besides the main crew, and it's just sort of a lack of attention given to the kind of core concept that RWBY wants to sell itself on, while it's sort of being preoccupied by trying to tell, in my opinion, a story that it wasn't built to be suited for, which is the whole maiden quest line thing.
It goes into an issue I've had to show, which I've been identified by being in the fan space for a long enough, is one of the main things that you're identifying. I believe it's consistency is the main issue with RWBY. It waxes and wanes in what it's interested in, and the other part of that is then it has premise depth, which is a sort of I don't know if it's a real thing, but it's something a term that I coined, where the show, as initially sold and envisioned, is so vastly and tonally different that to where it's ended up, it sort of doesn't mix together. And it's not to say individually any aspect of it is like terrible. That's a different argument for a different conversation. But like the premise depth of the show is, because the show is wildly different where it's ended up, and it's just something that needed to be accounted for a bit better, and maybe a bit more planning, a bit more consistent in its execution of things. Or else, if you do one season at a time of, I think this would be a neat idea, you end up with a whole bunch of stacked bricks that you have to keep referencing, but you're also jettisoning earlier bricks, and then the show just feels very uncohesive.
Yeah. I mean, famously, I think one of our friends says no season of RWBY is canon except for the one that you're watching. I think that was Joker, Mono Joker, who said that, which felt very, very true. Yeah. Where it's like, it's kind of, it does lack that coherency, that like that wholeness that other series may or may not have. Not unique to RWBY, but definitely is a problem.
And I'd argue that, again, we sort of over-glorify volumes 1, 2, 3, but I do think those 3 volumes are consistent within themselves. They do feel like they're connected. They do feel like whatever story that they tell each volume, which is varying degrees of the story being built up before the rug pull of the fall of Beacon, that they do tonally consistently work together. And it's the hard change of the school and leaving to see the rest of Remnant, where I don't think that they were prepared and still aren't prepared to show us the rest of Remnant, which is one of the main things going forward. If you were to do something, that needs to be much more examined, planned for, and thought through.
Yeah, and I think that I've seen comments that Volume 4 onwards is kind of where the actual plot, the real story starts, and then Volumes 1 to 3 are kind of like meandering around without any story. But I would argue that it already had a story, it just wasn't a plot-heavy kind of story, because the idea of a slice of life anime with about a monster under the academy already sounds like a cool idea by itself. It didn't, need to be anything else necessarily.
Yeah, planned or not, the Salem plotline has always felt like an addition. We all know that at least some variation of it was always planned, but I think they found a premise that they were able to hit naturally in the 1, 2, 3 arcs, that then they had to swerve to get back to the big plot that they wanted. And this is this consistency dichotomy that RWBY's always struggled with, because it's built around the frames of one thing trying to implement another thing, and that is a central conflict between RWBY about what the show is. Is it meant to be serious? Is it meant to be silly? Is it meant to be monster of the week? Is it meant to be political intrigue and drama, social commentary, fun, adventure? Like, it tries to be all things and is nothing in that regard. It feels like I'm being negative on it, but it's just, this is the type of planning that a show that would have been handled by a more plan-orientated...
experienced team, straight up also.
Yeah, experienced.
Because again, RT was pretty young in terms of, I think, was RWBY their first, completely original?
Yeah.
I'd say so, yeah.
Thing? Yeah, so...
Yeah, and...
rough.
Yeah, and the divide in the fandom between all the different opinions of RWBY are kind of exacerbated by the fact that, Voice 1 to 3 and onward both feel like not just completely different art direction wise, but also feel like completely different stories tonally and everything.
Well,
that led to the whole fandom
you
thing.
once said to me in a private chat, when we were just talking about stuff, is you find it, and so did I when you said it, strange that there are fans of RWBY who are very serious fans, who are fans post Volume 4. As in,
Yes.
not that they're fans of Volume 4 onwards, is their conception of RWBY is based on starting somewhere after 4. So there's the past to them of a different, almost a different show in their heads.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
they're only
it is.
fans
It is
moving
like
forward.
completely sectioned off almost to a degree, and you often find those people who are also the ones that are like, just redo the first bit in Maya, or like it's a general kind of like disregard for the earlier like work of RWBY, as if its ness didn't make the rest of RWBY happen, you know?
Yeah.
As if it is not something that can be like enjoyed and loved.
Yeah, I mean, our perspective is definitely from as RWBY old heads, but I do see how the newer fans have the perspective, because you know the Maya style is technically, it has been the majority of RWBY in that style, so I can see why they would view Volumes 1 to 3 not as like the core concept of RWBY as it started, and more like just, oh, it was just part
An
of the growing
exception.
pains. Yes,
Yeah.
It was just
It's
like,
that's not what RWBY is. RWBY is this, and it's the Salem, it's the Maidens, it's all this, and it feels odd. But again, yeah, we're such old fans of stuff. It's kind of hard to like divorce that from what RWBY is completely.
yeah, especially from like
Either
certain.
side is wrong. I think it's one of the, I say failings, but it's not the right word, but like the failings of RWBY is it is essentially two different shows that never reconcile that fact. It promised consistently to be, no, we're still the same show. The next volume will have the bits that you want as well as all the new stuff. It was sort of that non-stop promise. And after 10 years, we just sort of, both sides realized that there were essentially two shows, and there's no correct answer about what you should do about that, but that's just one of the central issues with RWBY as a property, is it is two shows.
Yeah, and there's definitely things to like about Maya, and like later like ideas and things that happened for 4 to 9 on like all levels, on like style, on like technical execution, on certain like plot lines and stuff. But yeah, it is hard to reconcile the two RWBYs. Before you, there are two RWBYs.
Inside you, there are two.
Yeah, but basically that goes all the way back to just having like a care to attention and detail to what I guess the kind of, you know, fantasy that RWBY wants to be. And it's something that will probably be hard to do, you know, with a continuation of Volume 10. But, you know, given the long hiatus, I think even if they did something quite wildly different in terms of like tone and whatnot, but still kind of have the same-ish plot, I think they could afford to take a few risks, I think. Yeah, so moving on from that, we'll move on to next point, which is Sci-Fantasy Fusion. So, part of the appeal of RWBY's world is how it blends the worlds of fantasy and modern sci-fi together. It's a world where robots, guns, and complex mechanical weapons exist in tandem with superpowers, you know, semblances, flaming swords, elemental powers, and half-animal people. So I don't think that RWBY should lean too hard into one side or over the other. So no place in the world should feel too much like a medieval fantasy where, you know, the heroes go to a village where everyone is dressed in robes using wooden spears, bows and arrows, and horse-drawn carriages, aka Volume 4, or too much like sci-fi, which is space travel and aliens, thankfully not something we've seen in RWBY yet, and lean more towards a modern near future era of technology. And the art here is obviously from Zone Zero, which I want to highlight, well, yet again, because it has a very consistent tone and technology level in its setting. Which
Yeah, and I think it's like modern near future is correct, because it doesn't quite edge into like full-on cyberpunk in terms of aesthetics and technology.
Correct. It's supposed to be a familiar element to it.
I believe that's.
What was that?
I think I've heard the term urban fantasy, which is sort of more fantastical.
Yeah, urban fantasy gets
I
used.
think that'd be pretty good. Yeah, it just has more of a Tolkien, I think, like connotation to it, where you expect orcs and like elves.
Yeah, I've
But
heard.
I think that does fit.
I've heard urban fantasy used mostly for like paranormal stuff, like Twilight, Justin Files.
Ill-defined term, I suppose. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard to nail aesthetics in just words.
So the next is vibrant individuality. So what I mean by those big words is that, well, color is an immensely crucial part of RWBY. Its four main characters, of course, are all named after colors, and the very first trailers, which are probably still the most viewed RWBY media ever, were also named after the colors they represented. So I believe that RWBY's world and aesthetics should likewise reflect that focus on color and this individual styling, not only in its general visual look, as in the world, but in its culture as well, the culture of the people in Vale, in Beacon Academy and such. So characters should freely express themselves in their daily wear, from multicolored hairstyles to accessories, and even charms, graffiti, and stickers on their weapons, things to individualize their weapons, which are obviously a huge selling point of the series. And again, this was a thing that was quite clear in, like, obviously Volume 2, which gave birth to some of the more fan favorite outfit changes for Team RWBY, which never appeared again, but are still fondly remembered. And it's this idea that we kind of had an insight into the characters, maybe not, you know, explicit background or anything like that, but we just kind of got to enjoy them as characters more often when, you know, when they style themselves differently, when they decorate their belongings, their rooms, things like that. And this is something that I believe RWBY should wholeheartedly embrace itself. And of course, to cite ZZZ again, because I have some examples here, they have like all these, because of its very urban aesthetic, it really leans into all like the graffiti and street art aesthetic on their weapons. So any kind of Guilty Gear elements too, because Guilty Gear also has like these embossed printings and all that on their weapons that just make it very stylish and larger than life, while still being relatable, because, you know, it kind of leans into the fantasy of, you know, someone wanting to be part of this Beacon Academy, who, if you had a cool weapon, you would also want to like give it a, you know, cool paint job or put your favorite stickers on it. And I think RWBY should really lean into that fantasy as well, because of, you know, the fandom culture that has thrived because of it, with all the OCs and whatnot. And to kind of highlight this as well, that the social media often highlight certain characters that they have, with, you know, highlighting their belongings, what accessories they wear, and of course their weapons are shown here. So then next is character design, specifically non-human type character designs. Character designs in RWBY should also not be afraid to explore wildly diverse designs for their cast, especially with the potential the fauners have, which are the half-animal people in RWBY, to really lean into their potential as half-animals and not simply just humans with animal ears or a tail, or, you know, that one trait limitation that they have. And, you know, really lean into the fact that, you know, it's not supposed to be hyper realistic like fantasy work. It's supposed to be a very more on the fantastical and more on the highly visual, highly stylish end. And this is something that is, of course, executed very well in the gacha space, and, you know, more anime oriented works like Arknights and again ZZZ, where they really push the designs of these characters. And I feel that the fauners would have been a lot more distinct and interesting, and, you know, clearly distinctified from the humans, had they, you know, really leaned into the differences they had with people, down to, you know, being fully like half animal. In some cases, the extent of their animal traits differing between individuals and all that. And of course, different fashion choices that they have as well. And the accommodations that they make, because I'll attach this in post, but there is like this one ZZZ social media post that was just about how they style the pants differently in this world to accommodate half animal people who have tails. So it's like highlighting the actual tailoring within that world to accommodate this, and that's already like an extra bit of passive world building that doesn't need much to point out, but yet pulls so much weight for the believability of its world. And that's kind of partly what I mean too, with, you know, the fact that attention and care is put into the world and setting that the story is trying to be.
I love that so much, actually. It's also in My Hero, where they make there's like a shopping episode, and they go to the mall and they discuss how like tailoring has come back, and that there's just tailors at like stores that will tailor your clothes upon buying them. Because it's the varieties of bodies and like shapes. It's just so varied. It's just like, yeah, they've just reintegrated like this, and this is just normal.
Yeah, due to the
It also can do double duty where the type of dimorphism that you're referring to with like more accentuated variations between humanoids, it's largely safe from it collapsing under itself because you've got the grim, which are a clear defined line where there is the grim and then there's everything else. So you can have this huge variation between the characters, and having that variation may help or have helped in a theoretical rewrite that it won't easily fall into very specific American historical allegories, which like start to become more complicated and more nuanced when if they are varying degrees of extreme animal people, it makes the story a bit more flexible in what you can do with your characters, what stories you want to tell without starting to get uncomfortable for the audience, which was something that they ran into. They made it a civil rights show, and then they had to be very careful about what they did with those civil rights.
Yeah.
And then the point that I'm trying to say is having the more variation in the characters will basically allow you to have more variation in the plot you tell with them.
No, yeah, it ends up being a soft like writing fix because you are no longer having like a one-for-one allegory going on. I think a show that does pretty well with that is also Beastars. Of like the nature of like all the different species of characters makes it very hard for you to draw direct immediate parallels to anything in real life, and that makes it like a more complex and interesting story to then consume. And also again, the designs just slap because you're allowed to do more.
The slapping is just so
yeah that's kind of a main reason, and the rest are kind of nice effects as a result of that. Yeah. And yeah, since you brought up the Grim, and I think that they really did cook with the Grim as like a visual thematic, because they're still probably like my favorite type of eldritch monster aesthetic with like the red, black, and all that. It's just very easy to identify compared to like even like so many other monster designs I've seen in like, you know, various RPGs, games, or shows. The Grim always they feel right, you know. They have a very classic evil look to them because the color scheme, and they're very easy to design for because they have a very strong, you know, visual theme to them with the bone and the shadow. It's really nice, and they should, you know, keep that. So then next is tech porn. So the most iconic image in RWBY, save for its red-caped heroine, is the instantly recognizable Crescent Rose. And RWBY's weapons are what sets it apart from any other setting, or rather, you know, it doesn't make it like totally unique because, you know, there's like Monster Hunter and God Eater, these kind of similar settings, but it kind of sets it apart from other conventional settings within and into, you know, that kind of bracket. So making these weapons look as cool and tangible to the audience as possible should also be a high priority. So a character's weapon in RWBY should never feel half-baked or like an afterthought. They are extensions of the character itself, as much a part of them as their outfit design or their voice. So it should matter a lot. It should have a lot of care put into it. And these weapons should feel like characters all on their own with unique designs, modes, and functions. So no two weapons should look or even sound alike. Even the sound design for these weapons should feel different and unique. Watching a RWBY weapon transform for the first time should scratch your brain in the same way as watching an Autobot from Transformers transform into like a vehicle, or watching Iron Man suit up in the Iron Man movies. It should, you know, feel like you're watching something really intricate and that has a lot of thought put into it. And of course, it's just really freaking cool to see as well.
I think people's immediate criticism of that would be that, well, that's going to be hard to achieve when you have so many characters. And I actually think that's correct, but that's a limiting factor. You will be more cautious about introducing so many random characters that you will only ever use once, that you've got to design a weapon for, where it may be a restricting factor, which was lacking in the show, where just creating a character and then slapping a weapon together is how we got some very uninspired weapons. If the show's central identity is much more revolved around weaponry, which it was supposed to be, as you can tell by some of RWBY's very early dialogue, specifically Ruby Rose, the characters talking about weapons. It was never really delivered, and then we started to get just very bland weapons that just sort of started to transform form with a little twirl, and there was nothing behind, no source behind them. I think you used that last time. No source in the weapon creations, and also just because of my special brain of autism, does it bug no one else that in the really nice Dusk Queendom anime, the Crescent Roses consistently painted the wrong color in locations? There are 3 things wrong with this animation, and it's driving me insane.
Is it?
It's black in spots it shouldn't be. Sorry.
I think specifically that gets you. It did not kill me, but that's funny to hear.
That is beyond my area of expertise. But yeah, but you are definitely correct in that we didn't. If that were the case, we wouldn't have to pretend to like Team Bronze, which had like a guy who threw buzzsaws, and the guy with the shock cattle prod, and the girl with, well, she had like a sniper axe. It was kind of cool, but all these very very
with murderer, but never mind.
yeah, very like
No, that's pretty.
Yeah.
The skateboard was cool, but this kind of more afterthought type weapons, because Bolin, one of the VIZ's teammates, he just had a staff. He was like a monk character, and he had no business being in a show like RWBY if they were starting to it. And if they had put more care into thinning the cast so that less characters meant more thought put into them, we might have actually seen the other half of Team Sun do anything at all, which is Sun's team, which is pretty important character. But
yeah, and Team Indigo, the crowdfunding OC team, that was also like really pretty important.
Yeah.
To this day, Neon's weapon doesn't have a name. The nunchucks don't have a name.
Not even in that law book that they put out?
According to the RWBY Wiki, which I've checked recently, there is no name for her nunchucks. I will be proved wrong in the comments, of course, because I've stated a fact on the internet. But from my understanding, they just never got around to naming it, and well, she's probably dead now. No, she's not dead.
And it's really sad, because that's one of the core things we learned, is that everybody's got their special name for their special weapon that they made themselves, because you have to, because you're a hunter. Like, come on, please.
Yeah,
like, they could have spent, like, if they didn't create 1 or 2 more characters for the Vital Festival, just really shrink it down by 2 characters, they probably could have found enough time to name Neon's weapon.
Yeah, and opinions about Harry Potter aside, they should lean into it the way that they lean into the ones of like how overly granular you can be about its length and its wood type and its core. I mean, that's the kind of thing that RWBY would nerd over if she was in that setting. So I think it should carry over here as well.
It's just interesting. I'll just go into just one little thing. You just said that RWBY would nerd over weapon things, but it links back into a point we just made in the previous slide, where there are people who have been fans of RWBY for a long period of time, but they're 4 onwards fans, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They don't even believe the weapon nerd aspect of it because it hasn't been a character point in RWBY for longer than RWBY's been a character. He occasionally goes, ooh, a weapon, but the show just never delivered, never did anything with that core character aspect of the main character, to the point where some serious fans, like these are serious fans, just don't even really consider that an aspect of RWBY's character, which is insane to me.
Well, that's crazy, isn't it? It's because on one side that they treat it kind of like fanon, where it's like, where do you get this headcanon from that RWBY's an engineer, that she would be a mechanic, that she would make stuff. But also, it's like, you can't be so mad at them, because it's like, yeah, RWBY was a weapons nerd for what, maybe like 2-3 years in like the entire run of RWBY, which is like 10 plus years at this point. So it's like, I guess at a certain point, that isn't like a characteristic of Ruby Rose. She's not a mechanic. She's not like a gun weapon nerd in like the scope of things. It was a little heartbreaking.
It was a temporary hyperfixation. That's correct. And all the other times that the show did bring up RWBY gushing with weapons, which I think they did in like Volume 5 once, maybe in the Atlas arc, it did just feel like just purely lip service, just to kind of remind the old heads that it was still a thing, but nothing really.
It was still cool.
Yeah, an exception, not actual characterization, you know.
Yeah.
This just leans back into a point that we made last thing, is I think RWBY should be about RWBY, but that's a central conflict between what is RWBY, the show.
Mm-hmm.
Controversial opinion.
Yeah. But relating to that as well is being tactile and analog. So to this end,
Love this.
yeah, sauce at bottom. To this end, I believe other aspects of RWBY's world should also reflect this feeling of physicality, not just in the weapons. So RWBY, yes, should feel like a magical world because everyone has semblances and whatnot, but also a very interactive one. So if it's more mystical aspects like semblances and dust, the more fantasy magic stuff represents the soft side of the setting, then the weapons and the tech should feel like the hard side of it. So characters should interact with highly analog technology in their daily lives, things like the scrolls that they interact with, or the chunky clack of turning on a cassette player. Likewise, of course, the weapons should reflect this, and in fact be kind of the most prominent example of this, with finger triggers, buttons, screws, and vents. Of course, many different sounds and functions that make them a wonder for viewers to speculate about what they can do and what their function is, making them excited to see what they're capable of, which is like a similar feeling that I had like in Volume 2 when Neptune whipped out his spear thing for the first time, and then it turned to a trident, and then it turned to a gun, and it made you really like wonder just what he can do with it and just what it's capable of. It's that kind of feeling, and and the fact that it's a near modern setting, that it really should lean into the kind of tech aspects that help flesh out the world. And this does feel like a very specific thing to talk about, but I think that's kind of why. And like I said, that if we or we're in the position of directing or helping to create RWBY, this is the kind of stuff that people are paid to pay attention to, because once you have elements like these, like the way the tech sounds and moves, like it's something that you don't really notice at first, but once it's gone or changes, you kind of notice it immediately, and then you feel that something is missing, and that's kind of why it was there in the first place. And think of like times where, let's say, a game or a show kind of suddenly changed the way the guns sound over an update, and now you kind of find yourself not liking it as much because you kind of like the old sounds better, or the reload animation was just a bit not satisfying enough. And these small elements that build up on each other to kind of create the overall experience and enjoyment of the world, which is kind of what I'm trying to impress and emphasize here.
I would go further on expanding that. It's more of a generalized piece of world building advice, is that it is so easy to understand the idea of why scrolls look the way they do. They are a simple solution to needing a phone, when, much like in the real world, once the smartphone was invented, it killed about 15 other individual inventions. A lot of people do not have watches, cameras, you can just go down through the list, compasses, all this kind of things, because it is a all-in-one sci-fi machine. Unfortunately, a floating holographic screen, which is the short form in people's head for future technology, is fundamentally the worst thing you can design, because a button is one of the most simple human tactile devices that you can imagine, that can convey so much intentionality. Pressing a button has an effect that you feel visceral. You switch a light switch on. It's why most people like the idea of a voice-activated house end up ripping an Alexa out, because it is just easier and it feels more correct to flip a light switch rather than go, hey, whatever, turn your lights on. I almost did the old Xbox thing. And then the other part of it is then it gives you ways to separate interesting design language, that things that don't have to be weapons. You're limiting yourself the second you start designing a holographic screen, because then if holographic phones exists, why is not all things in your world a holographic display? You immensely just shortened everything down to there is only one form of acceptable technology now, which is why Atlas technology is very strange when you look at it, because they are attempting to put tactile design into something that the language is completely non-tactile. And then the third point is it's the same premise as RWBY's cosplay. RWBY has things in it. Shows should have things in it that hyper-obsessive nerds want to build out of cardboard.
Yes,
But
exactly.
and I'm very serious about that. I think one of the marketable ideas, I'm not sure if they ever did it, but I'm like, the minute I saw RWBY's embossed rose earphones in episode 1, it's like they should sell those. And you limit yourself to that. If she has hollow earbuds, not that she ever does, and it's like, well, that can't exist, and then even if it does, no one couldn't sell it, you wouldn't buy it. But just stuff that you do naturally in the world will potentially help reinforce the world in the real world, because you can make that thing, or someone can make it, they can be engaged with it. But this whole non-tactile design language that has creeped into modern things, you get this Iron Man screen effect where people just start having to throw holographic screens around just for some tactile engagement, and it's a really big misstep. It's probably one of the reasons that 80s media is so prevalent, is people love pressing buttons. It's just human brain.
Retrofuturism is so hardcore, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's
Sorry, that's just my thing about. I saw this slide and I'm like, never has anything been so missed in RWBY as the technology. Like, it's actually one of the things that's insane when you think about that. You would design a world that has present rows, also has a scroll, as we can see. I'm like, wow, those things are so different that you haven't even thought about how different they are and how they hurt each other. Like,
get that mobile rotary phone in there. Come on.
Yeah, that thing is cool. But like, why doesn't everyone essentially just use velvet style weapons? Just why are they all holographic swords? It's lighter, cheaper thing. Present rows could just be a holo projection, like henceforth, but that's a different story. And henceforth is fucking awesome. But
Space.
yeah, this slide is.
It's one of those things that you do something very small because you don't want to design a phone. I understand it. You've got to design so many things for RWBY, but the second you design a holographic screen, you have literally destroyed like entire timelines of stuff that you could design to sell your show to your fans. So,
Yeah, yeah, this slide was a particular fixation of Jay's. This is his slide. His slide, but
sorry.
But yeah, but no, that's totally good. But there is a reason why everyone kind of universally loves, the first Iron Man suits, and then why people are kind of like half and half on like the nano tech stuff later on, and it's kind of feeding into that, the fact that it feels less weighty, less solid, less real to the viewer,
less engaging as well.
Yeah.
People build working Iron Man helmets. There's like files and projects to have face opening mechanical Iron Man suits. No one, I mean, you couldn't, but no one would want to make a nano suit that's just like, here's some goo that I painted on you and you can say, well, that's a nano suit.
And that kind of has to do with again, I mean, these points all kind of go back to the whole thing about attention to detail, and why the fact that part of why Arcane is also such a convincing world is because of the things that they add to make Piltover feel like a believable place, even if it's not explained to you outright. You just kind of see the kind of strange doodads or things in the world that are just matter of fact but yet feel unique. It just kind of adds to that immersion. And obviously within RWBY's means, because it takes a lot of concept art to get that going, but yeah, something to consider. So the next slide is about detail contrast. So this is a more visually oriented thing I want to point out, is that I feel that RWBY's models should have areas of visual complexity and simplicity to create interesting visual variety that engages the viewer's eye without overwhelming them. So this is more of a it's more of a character design thing that is taught, where you don't want your character to have too many details everywhere, because then your eye kind of doesn't know where to look. So in this case, the weapons and the outfits have kind of the more realistic details, and not just in terms of detailing, but also textures, things like stitchings and whatever material the clothes and weapons are made out of, and using, of course, the inherent advantage of 3D models to portray all these complex visual details in animation, while, of course, the faces themselves should remain simple and hyper stylized to maintain this more anime look. And it accomplishes a nice visual balance that feels very nice to look at, and of course would suit RWBY quite well, because as shown in previous slides with like all the graphical elements that I would like to have in RWBY, that it is a mix of these very solid hyper detailed weapons with the more expressionistic colorful aspects, which of course were an element in RWBY's trailers and things like that make it a very pleasing combination. The next is and now we're getting straight into the actual creatives. So just now was the section on the visual direction, or rather specific elements of visual direction I wanted to highlight, and now we're getting into the reason this presentation exists in the first place, which is to highlight specific people. So the most important ingredient for RWBY to hit the right stride in its production is having the right people for the job. So to bring up the example of John Wick, a bit of backstory about that movie. Nobody believed that two stunt people could direct a movie until they made John Wick, because I may have the details slightly inaccurate, but it was two stunt people who wanted to make a movie, and they couldn't secure funding for it for a very long time, because they were just two stunt guys that and not actual directors. But then when they actually managed to get it made, and then John Wick came out and became a huge success and became its own franchise, and it was because John Wick only worked as a series because the directors were incredibly passionate and skilled with stunt work and fight choreography, and decided to make a film utilizing it from start to finish. They leaned into their strengths as creators. Even though they weren't directors, they leaned into what they were good at, which is stunt work and fight choreography, and it ended up being a huge success. And they were successful because a studio was willing to give them a chance and fund them. And RWBY is one of those media that I feel is in a very similar position, because a conventional showrunner from like a more conventional TV studio or whatnot could not have conceived RWBY, because its creator Monty, or rather somebody like Monty, meaning people that he shared the space with, people who were passionate about martial arts movie, about cosplay, about fight choreography, about animation as an art form. It was such a melting pot of different interests combining these things into a single story concept that really you had to be someone very passionate and in tune to those tropes and media inspirations to make something like RWBY. So like I said, with replicating Monty's style, having people who get RWBY, meaning who understand RWBY as a concept and the appeal of RWBY, is not hard, because there are many people who have similar interests that RWBY kind of falls right into. I believe that having these people on the crew is a must to truly make RWBY shine, and that's kind of why a lot of indie animation and fan animators often get that RWBY feel right, even with very short animations. Is because there are small groups of people who have that common understanding and goal of what RWBY is like in their heads, that they're able to kind of execute on it, and that's kind of what the kind of core team that a professional RWBY production also needs. So the people that I'm showcasing here throughout will be a selection of people that I believe would get RWBY, even if they haven't watched it or anything like that. People who not only love things like anime and action as entertainment, don't just enjoy it as a media, but who also see it as a highly niche and specific art form to be mastered and appreciated. So these are not people that necessarily have to be fans of RWBY, but they have to kind of understand the kind of vibe RWBY is trying to get at, the kind of media that RWBY is inspired by, what kind of stylings and visual elements that it has, that kind of thing. So to start off, we'll highlight certain animation studios. So here are a short list of studios I think could execute RWBY style excellently, divided into 3D animation and 2D animation. So they may not necessarily animate an entire RWBY series, because some of them are indie and a lot of them have not, really animated entire series by themselves. But they would be excellent choices for any shorts, trailers, any other animations associated with the franchise, because again, to kind of impress upon the viewer that RWBY, we really don't need to insist that RWBY has that VIZ has to make like a full-blown RWBY series right away. They can obviously just get their bearings first by making or contracting smaller animations, trailers, shorts, things that whet their appetite and kind of help define RWBY's direction moving forward before committing to such a huge thing as like a mainline series. Because perhaps if RWBY, the original series, had more time to just kind of meander around and make these kind of shorter videos, they could have had more time to kind of really define what they wanted out of the series. So here's the list here, but we'll go into each of them individually. So of course, first, I think the one that a lot of people have as their favorite is Dillongoo Studio. So obviously the studio is helmed by former RWBY animator Dillongoo, who animated on Volume 3. I can't say specifically what fights he did with 100% certainty, but I believe it's mostly like the Pyrrha versus Penny, I believe, and Yang versus Mercury, a lot of the fights in Volume 3, basically. And his studio has done consistent work for games like Arknights, Punishing Grey Raven, and more. So a lot of over time, he started with fan animations, and then over time slowly built like a quite impressive clientele of very prolific game companies in at least the Eastern game company space, which I think has made his studio a very reliable choice for animating at least like a RWBY mini-series, probably not a full-length one, but he definitely has the chops for it, and he was definitely caused a bit of a stir when he first threw his hat in the ring in the interest of acquiring RWBY after Rooster Teeth shut down. So that's one of them. So this is the kind of ones that fans usually cite, and obviously a good choice. But I would also like to highlight Subutai Productions. So they are also an indie animation team. They are largely known for their Genshin Impact fan animations. Their series kind of reimagines them using modern firearms and elemental magic in highly creative fight scenes. And you can kind of see from the examples here the kind of usage of different elemental powers and weaponry in like a very technological aspect, like how he's shooting them with ice bullets. Obviously you can very easily imagine them kind of shooting like dust rounds, and it's this kind of rule of cool mixed with attention to how they portray the world. That is the kind of mindset that would work great for RWBY. This kind of very showcasing the world through the creativity of his fight scenes. And then on the front of 2D studios, so of course, to preface that, I do believe that a RWBY mainline series would work best in 3D, simply because the main reason primarily is because of the weapons, obviously. If the weapons are 3D, and the fact that its roots started with 3D animation with Monty's fights, the highly complex choreography that works extremely well in 3D but will be a lot harder to replicate in 2D simply because of the complexity of the weapons and such. But if there would be studios that would handle any kind of RWBY animation within 2D, some of the choices I would have is Studio Tumble. Now, Studio Tumble is a Chinese studio whose clients have included Riot Games and Hoiverse, along with a number of their own highly impressive original animations. And they have a YouTube channel. All of these studios that I'm showcasing have a YouTube channel or a Twitter of some sort that you can kind of check their work out. And these are just some clips that showcase, what kind of action they can choreograph and direct. And this is just one of the examples. And next is Flying Box Production, and this one would probably be more familiar to people as a Western animation studio, largely known for Rise of TMNT and Lego Monkey Kid. So they've largely done family-friendly cartoons, but it's their highly kinetic anime-inspired style that I think would be perfect for something like RWBY, because you can obviously tell from watching things like their stuff like Rise of TMNT that they are very much in tune and knowledgeable about anime as an art form, as a medium, what makes good anime style action without being too, how do I put this, like kind of without being too performative about it, because without having a random mech pull out a huge drill and don't you guys recognize the Gurren Lagann reference, that kind of thing. It's all about the visual presentation rather than specific references. But that's also my second choice. And the third would be Studio Grackle. So Studio Grackle is helmed by Spencer Wan, who has done work for Castlevania and Owl House, and they've mostly done trailers and opening animations for Hades, Legend of Vox Machina. I believe this one is a clip from Hyper Light Drifter, and basically a lot of game trailers and openings, but of course would be very suited for any kind of RWBY style short animation of some sort that obviously would go very hard with them doing it because of the sheer kineticism of the fight. The satisfying weight of the strikes is just very cool. So those are specific studios that I highlight, and now I would like to go into specific animators, individual animators, that if I had the RWBY dream team, that I could go to each of them, Nick Fury style, and recruit them. Do I ever need to make a disclaimer for people not to deliberately reach out to these people? I'm just trying to say, hey, they're cool.
Yeah, do that, and then
say
also
this is
tell
a dream.
a disclaimer of if it's not a slight if I did or did not name you, if you're a fandom artist or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yes.
This is me spinning a big wheel.
Yeah, so of course, disclaimer, the people that I'm showcasing here is just because I find them cool, and if I was in my imagination making a RWBY team, would I hire them for the team? Yes, I would. That's all there is. So if you want to visit their pages just to kind of appreciate their work, then all good, but please don't expect nor bother them for anything more than that. It's all just for fun. And if, of course, if you were not rather showcased in this list, then please don't take it the wrong way. I can only highlight so many people, and in fact, I don't even have Dillongoo himself on this list because it's just kind of an obvious choice, and if I were to showcase every single RWBY fan animator, will be here a lot longer. And I think another thing that I also want to emphasize is the fact that yes, fan animes do understand how RWBY fights are animated, but that doesn't mean that the team should be composed of entirely fan animators. It's more about whether they have the right mindset, the right kind of work, the right kind of eye for the kind of animation that they do, or the art that fits RWBY, or rather my imaginary version of RWBY in my head. So with that disclaimer out of the way, the first person I'd like to showcase is Nanigasi, who I would slate as a combat animator. So this is definitely one of my favorites, where they're very great understanding of the tactility and weight with RWBY's weapons and transformations, and they showcase a lot of the motions, the smears, and the camera angles that emphasize the weight of the strikes and strong posing. And you can see how some of these animations, they always end on kind of a cool pose, and that's the kind of we need that kind of aura farming back in RWBY because it was really cool when they did it, and it's also a thing that I want to emphasize with RWBY, particularly because it's a thing that I think was brought up briefly before this, but the fact that in later RWBY, how animating crescent rows spinning over time became like simplified to just like a red blur or like a giant red circular smear instead of being able to individually see how it moves. Always felt like there's something missing, and that's kind of what I meant earlier with the whole bit about art direction and why it would be kind of our jobs to pay attention to this thing, because it's things that, as simple as the way that crescent rows is animated spinning, that once you notice it's done differently, you already kind of feel that something's missing. And that's why I would like to highlight animators that kind of already fundamentally understand it, so they kind of already get it right the first time. Does that make sense? So that's Nanagasi, and next is Soma Animation. Soma Animation, I believe, is a RWBY fan. This is all some of their animation work from a D&D campaign that they have using RWBY OCs, so obviously they are aware of it. But again, I would choose them as a combat animator specifically. And AKMotions, of course, this is one of the more prominent combat animators, fan animators for RWBY specifically. So this would be kind of one of the RWBY fan animators that I'll be showcasing specifically. Then No Tables. So No Tables is also I would choose as a combat animator, and they've done several Genshin Impact shorts about very similar works to Subutai Productions, and I believe that No Tables also kind of does work for that studio, but on his own. They've also done their own work. It involves elemental weapons and ammo and all these very cool concepts and combat work. And then HakureixNori is a Chinese animator. They might be one or two people. They're on Bilibili, so the information that I can gather about them is sparse. But they've animated this one Arknights fan animation called Heat, and this I highly recommend watching it, because the amount of the mix of different 3D and 2D elements is really masterful here. The kind of even the shaders, like the way it's styled, the colors are very pleasing despite being very simple. And watching the short feels very like kind of how I could like imagine, if I were to picture like RWBY kind of, because VIZ is kind of starting from whatever position they're in with RWBY, which is obviously like probably not an insane amount of funding, but enough to have some sort of animation going. I could easily imagine it looking at least like this, where it obviously not pixel level or anything, but it looks nice. The colors are pleasing. Everything looks clear and visible. What kind of level of visual detail I can reasonably expect? And of course, the main weight that's being pulled is kind of the stylishness of different visual elements. You can see on the left example, the fact that some text goes on screen to kind of emphasize the rhythm of the fight and just kind of what's going on. And of course, the very delicious impact frames, but also on this top right section, how it just changes like the camera work and character perspective is just very stylish overall. There's just a lot to appreciate and learn from this short that could work for RWBY's aesthetic. The next is zetuZT, who's mainly done fan animations for ZZZ, and this is another very nice combat animator that I've really going to appreciate their work. They just have a very, very nice understanding of, you know, the weightiness of weapons and strikes. Of course, they kind of animate on kind of a lower frame rate overall, but it's led to kind of a very chunky looking, satisfying impact to the animations. And of course, the models, I can't be sure if they made the models themselves. I believe for like ZZZ models, it's probably taken from the game itself from somewhere. But probably the shaders they use also, I've grown to really like. It's similar to the Arcanite shot, where there's something about the cell shaded look that I really like, that still looks nice and simple without falling into the pitfall of plasticness that RWBY kind of tends to fall into. And then next is ArainyDancer, who is quite a multidisciplinary animator. They do a lot of combat animations, but also a lot of character acting as well. They just do a lot of different forms of animation, and what I really love about their work is they have a very keen eye for an understanding of firearms and character acting through combat. So they do a lot of Signalis fan animations, and a lot of them pull a lot of weight in kind of showing the fatigue or the desperation or even the sloppiness of characters through how they load their weapons or how they handle their weapons. Do they seem panicked? Do they seem trained? Do they seem thinking, or are they rushing? There's a sort of pacing and characterization to the way that they handle something that you would think is as neutral as, you know, shooting a gun or reloading a gun, that is really attentive, and which I think will be absolutely perfect for something like RWBY that focuses so much on its weapons that it will add a lot of believability and realness to RWBY's weapons, because obviously RWBY's weapons, even though they are fantastical giant transforming weapons, they are obviously based on real world firearms and principles, especially things like Blake's weapon, which is like a pistol, or Yang's guns, which are more like shotguns. If they had like this kind of extra layer of the big word is verisimilitude, I believe, but the kind of, you know, the believability of it, the way that it feels like it feels correct when you see like a character using such weapons. And I think ArainyDancer would be a really helpful animator for that respect, which they also one of the animators for Dillongoo Studio as well. So, you know, if Dillongoo Studio manages to get some RWBY work, then that will also be a great boon. And the next is just a quick highlight for MirabeauStudio, specifically just for the way they mostly do character animation. So like the way the characters emote and talk and body language, and specifically just for sign language, simply because this one clip made me convinced that you could make Neo communicate through sign language and it would actually work, and people could kind of like just act as if they understand her, instead of, you know, having her always gesturing to things or typing text or holding up a big cartoonish sign like in RWBY Chibi. I think just specifically for Neo, she's just such a fan favorite character that I would like to highlight. Mirabel.
Do you remember what she's saying on the left hand side?
She's saying,
I'll be your little PogChamp.
yeah.
Yeah, she's
Your
saying,
little PogChamp.
fine, you're my little PogChamp.
Come here. Yeah.
Yeah, Shizuka's great. I love it.
Yeah, that's great. And well, not to get too much into Mirabel's colorful history of RWBY, because it's quite a roller coaster that they went through, so I wanna get into that.
Yeah, and they also work for Dillongoo Studios now.
Really? Wow. Just collecting them all like Pokemon.
Yeah,
excellent.
I mean,
maybe he's had the same idea. That's why he's been Nick Furying all over the place. But yeah, that's one more. And ZiyueChen, who is a kind of a 2D animator, but I would recruit them specifically as an action director. I wouldn't know what the correct term for that is, but you know, they have a very nice command of satisfying timing and spacing, and they really understand how to stage action scenes within a 3D space. So staging specifically means like if you're making a movie or in this case an animation even, and you kind of obviously have to know, because it's constantly moving, there's a lot of things going on, you kind of have to know where the characters are at all times, when they move to this location and that location, to keep this consistent. Because obviously when you're coordinating so many different animators and people, it can get lost in translation if they're working on different shots at once. Some characters might be standing here, then they might end up teleporting to different parts of the map, just slightly, that makes it feel slightly off. And this particular animation of the bomb that they did, that has a 2D animation but is like working within a 3D space, that makes me really interested in seeing them, like what a RWBY kind of action scene would look like that is staged by them. So not like necessarily the specifics of the choreography of it, but more like the pacing of who goes where, and like where do the fights take place, that kind of thing. Next is MochiAnimator. So this is an animator I followed for quite a long time, mainly through finding out about their Rainbow animations, like here, and they've just been overall very pleasing style that I really love. That they kind of added them here because I think they just be a nice addition. They are very good generalist animator. I feel their animations are very smooth. They handle kind of all sorts of things well. Character animation, obviously here, like weapon handling, they just very versatile. So I would love to see more of their work if I had to put them on a RWBY team. And CGDASH is someone I encountered while researching with this. So I don't know what is the specific field this is, that I have to ask both of you, that is kind of determining like the look and the lighting of the 3D models. What would that job be?
It's more just a technical. I can't think of the exact word, but I understand what you mean. Just like what technical systems they're using to achieve the look, the desired look. Like the bottom right is clearly a washed out video VHS 1980s look, but the one in the middle is just sort of more generic, but like modern style lighting. I know what you're trying to say. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
Art director, I suppose. Probably art director.
Yeah, I was thinking art direction for the visual. Like they may have to also be part of like the character and set design, like on a technical level.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like art design, art director.
Yeah, I think probably one of the people whose job is to like kind of make things not look plastic, is how I put it in layman terms. And yeah, their work involves like a lot of lighting and making things kind of evoke that kind of anime 2D-ish look, which of course Dillongoo Studio also dabbles in a lot with their projects, that like that one video they did that kind of replicated like a very Makoto Shinkai type shot. So that kind of technical expertise. And then this is in the 3D section for some reason, but I kind of can't put it anywhere else. But Jokwa is mainly a VFX artist, and I think would be a nice asset as action choreographer, because I think one of the lost mediums that RWBY definitely takes inspiration from, but is kind of not super acknowledged, is stick fight animations. And because like I could definitely see like in a different path, RWBY would have just been like have like basically no plot, but would have been like a mainstay series at like Hyun Dojo, that studio. It's definitely one of those types of things, and I think that stick fight animators, even though they largely operate within like a 2D plane, like a side-scrolling kind of thing, Jokwa himself you can see here that they still implement a lot of 3D space and camera angles in some of their shots, and I think they have a lot to offer in terms of just the kind of speed and complexity that RWBY fights are known for, the kind of different intricacies of what kind of moves characters can do in a very short time. And also because stick fights, they're very simplified, it kind of maximizes which moments are supposed to be most impactful, which parts are the most aura farming. I think that'd be a lot of benefits there. And of course, just their general VFX expertise is also very useful for like the impact frames and weapon slashes and all that. Would also be just a general good skill set for something like RWBY. So now we're getting into VFX again. So another one I would like to showcase is Salvador Avila, and there's actually a lot of really good VFX artists on Twitter, and a lot of them probably, would very likely suit RWBY very well. So I'm just showcasing one of them, because one thing I did like about later RWBY, to actually finally compliment later RWBY for once, is they do have like a lot of these 2D VFX in a lot of their shots, like especially things like smoke and fire. They use a lot of 2D effects, which I do like. And then TuxedoPato, I would call them a motion animator. I wouldn't know what you would call them specifically, but what I would call motion animator is someone whose job is sort of help to conceptualize how a specific character moves. So what I love is their skill at conveying unique characterization through motion and combat movements, so how they move. So like distinct walk cycles, so you can see here how each character moves about is completely different based on their personality, and even secondary characteristics, so like things like animal ears or animal tails also are part of the animation. So you can see obviously with this really cool fox animation here, you can see how the tail and the kind of physicality of an animal is kind of conveyed through a humanoid body, which, as I've mentioned before, with like the faunas, it would really help push further just how wild you could go with the designs of the faunas, and how interesting you could make them, not only as visual designs as characters, but also in just how they fight. How they fight would be completely different because they have completely different biology from humans. And I would highly recommend looking at the rest of TuxedoPato's art, because they just have so much really cool stuff. They have a really creative way of imagining how characters move that will be a great asset to something like RWBY, where you kind of want to make sure each character, at least the main characters, move in unique ways with their weapons. Another one is in the similar field is Nikolay Salikhov. Again, very strong skills in regards to how characters move and how they fight blend together well, and how characters who move differently can also fight differently. So for this example here, there's like this flying character who uses like the swords that he has to push off the ground as he flies, and that's kind of like a great detail that we need, because this person, this animator, obviously has the right mindset for animating something like RWBY, because if you give them a weapon, they're gonna think about how would they use this weapon in combat. So like this character with the purse, this is if I assign them someone like Coco, who has like a giant purse to fight, someone with the skills like Nikolay is able to imagine how a character like this would fight with such a weird weapon and make it look cool. And this is the kind of these are the kind of people you want on a production team like RWBY.
Famously, I think there was only ever 2 people who could really animate Sun's gunchucks.
Yeah.
Most of RWBY.
Yeah, and that's why we need a whole team full of those.
Need at least 3.
At least 3. Artistry. But yeah, that's the 3D animator section. And now we're going into the artists, 2D artists. So for the purposes of this, obviously I won't be pointing out previous, lead artists like Ian Lee, Erin Wynn, and Christina Nguyen, because obviously for things like this, it'd be the obvious thing for fans to ask, why isn't this artist, like, will this artist be on this team, because they did so well on RWBY, so why they're on this list? But
it's also Christina Nguyen. That's how you say that.
Nguyen?
Nguyen, yeah.
Nguyen, yeah, okay. Yeah, we all know that they're goated. This list is to highlight other, proposed artists for the production team. Because as I've said, we kind of want to explore the possibilities to see the whole breadth of the people that could suit a production team like this, and not just we tread the same ground. We don't want to be the guy who casts Tom Holland and Zendaya and everything. We want to avoid that. So first, we actually be going through the roles, because this is kind of what ended up padding out the slideshow so much, is that I found so many artists that I found cool that I had to kind of subdivide what their quote-unquote jobs would be, or rather roles. So to divide them, we have concept artist, character. These are who I would get, who would create the character designs for RWBY's main and supporting cast. So all of the humanoids, the faunas, any kind of named character like that. We have mechanical. So they create the shape language and designs for RWBY's weapons, vehicles, technology, all of these hard surfaces to emphasize the whole tactile parts that I mentioned just now. Environment artists to create architecture and the environments for RWBY cities and different locales. Creatures, namely for grim monsters and enemies. Then we have illustrator, so concept artists will be people who kind of make the designs, but people that draw like the final art, the people who see, like, they will see it for like the volume covers, for posters, things like that. Those would be the illustrators. So these are who I would choose for those, and those are kind of like the Ian Lees and the Erin Wins, even though they have done concept art as well, but like those who do like the full complete illustrations. Then we have chibi artists. So this is something that I will add examples in post, but I think that chibi art actually pulls a lot more weight for like the marketability of something, a lot more than people give it credit for, because this is something that's very common with like gacha game companies, anime companies, is that they will use chibis a lot with their social media. They will post like comics of the chibis on Twitter, or they promote it using like stickers and emojis that chibis that people can download and use on social media, or even like in, let's say, games that they use, like whatever emojis or things like that. And it's very very memorable, and a lot of obviously fans like that kind of cute stuff. They'll often share gifs or gifs, as JJ would say, of these chibis, and it's just very easily shareable and cute and appealing, and that's why I'm gonna highlight specifically also chibi artists for promotional material, social media, and all that. And then collab artists are artists that, so these all are artists that I would quote unquote permanently employ for RWBY team, but collab artists are more like people that I would just hire for one-off illustrations or projects for RWBY. So they're like kind of guest artists. So these artists, they'll kind of help maybe design merch for this one figure, or they would draw this one poster. The factor in this is largely due to mainly how well known they are. It is a dream team, but I do feel like it'd be useful to kind of denote like, oh, this is a high profile artist, so we probably would get them just for like this one job. But for like these more staple jobs, it's not necessarily hiring, not that they're less skilled, but more like we want to showcase like less well known talent, and then kind of have like the celebrity artists, so to speak, be like their own section. So we kind of have like a full breadth of different talents to showcase. So first off, we have concept artist character. The first one I'll start with a pretty safe choice, but a very good choice, which is Mikkusushi. Mikkusushi, obviously, as you can see, has done fan art of RWBY, and they've also done official RWBY illustrations. So this one, I believe, was done for the RWBY Paladins collab. And what I really enjoy and love about Mikkusushi's art is that it's just very stylized. It fits a lot of my personal taste of what because I'm also a big fan of the Shiro Miwa manga of RWBY, which is has a very kind of dynamic, expressive kind of Studio Trigger-esque style, and that's kind of what I've always liked myself. And Mikkusushi's art definitely leans a lot into that aesthetic that I think would work extremely well for RWBY. More examples of his work here, and I think there'll be a definitely very good fit simply to show to lean into kind of the stylishness of RWBY that I'm picturing, because as I've mentioned here and in the previous stream about how RWBY should lean into like the flat colors, into the graphical elements, into the the colorfulness of it, that Mikkusushi's art style would fit very well into that kind of bracket. So that's kind of one of the main choices I would have, and probably like the only person associated like directly with RWBY, because I do want to showcase like more people who aren't associated with RWBY. And so next is Hartova Maverick, who is one of my favorite artists actually, and I would be very stoked if they worked on RWBY in any capacity, because I'm just a really big fan of their kind of semi-realistic style and their eye for detail. I just really love like their designs. You can see from their concept work here, they have a very interesting ideas and eye for detail in terms of props, so things like weapons and outfits that characters have. I've followed their work for many years. I've always enjoyed it. And the thing about them as well is they also do animation work. They're not so active on Twitter now, but I think they're kind of now employed in Studio Grackle, which I think is Spencer Wan's studio. So that's kind of where they are now. And I just really enjoy their work. I think they also have a very strong command of animation, as I mentioned. So they also can have very strong skill sets in regards to like strong posing, action posing, kind of conceptualizing how a character would move with weapons, how fight scenes would play out, storyboarding, different skills like that. And I also kind of would like to have a decent spectrum of styles across the RWBY concept art team, because concept art is not really stuff that you would see in the final product. So with a kind of greater variety of styles, you can kind of get a greater variety of ideas as well for how to execute certain ideas. And I think combining the more stylized method of Mikkusushi, who obviously has more simplified details in their designs but more expressive, and then combined with like Hartova's, which is more towards the realistic side, more heavily detailed, I think would be a nice balance to that. And then next I would choose Dekamofuchan. This is a concept artist I would get specifically if I want to harness characters. Definitely they have a very obviously clear understanding of the appeal of half animal characters or anthros, or what you will call them, and they just have very interesting design ideas that I really like. They have an eye for detail for weapons as well, which I think would suit well for RWBY. So just to show more of their work here, just very interesting character silhouettes, and also the fact that it's hard to explain, but it's just something like very modern about the art style. And I think that's kind of what we need when we want to make RWBY sort of relevant again in the current age, is that we do need to update its art style to kind of reflect what people would find cool and stylish in modern day, of course while keeping its kind of core appeals intact. But I think this art is also be very suitable for kind of capturing that kind of concept design as well. So next is, I think this is the fourth person, Karasu. And Karasu is a concept artist I would get whose skill set lies more towards fantasy style design. So here, of course, the previous examples, except for Hartova, were more like towards modern style designs, especially Dekamofu, who is more towards very modern / sci-fi designs. But Karasu, whose style I would really enjoy for the more kind of fantasy stylings that RWBY has. You can see like their style is very manga-ish, very kind of painterly as well, you could say. But also their choice of aesthetic and fashion feels more fantasy. It uses more like conventional materials like fabrics, and there's kind of a more fantasy flavor to it, which I think would be very useful for kind of fusing together the kind of sci-fi fantasy aesthetic that RWBY has. Because yes, we want it to kind of be that near future kind of setting, but we also know that RWBY obviously has characters based on fairy tales and all these mythological concepts. So having an artist on hand who's able to kind of evoke that kind of genre with their designs is also very helpful. And also I also want to highlight that just their very great use of like shadows and like lights and darks with their designs and their drawings in general would be very useful for conveying like that kind of stylized monochrome look that I described in the previous video about how to like emphasize that kind of stark contrast and like graphical elements with the solid colors look that I think will work really well for RWBY. So those are for all the character concept artists. And then an extra mention is Requin Cobalt, who is what I would call kind of a combat concept artist. So they're very good at not only VFX, so VFX is another whole aspect of 2D art that would do great for RWBY, but more so how they fight. So they do these sort of studies where the whole thing is just drawing how a character fights, drawing how they move, how they would pose, and what kind of attacks they will make. So basically, if you were to make a video game, let's say a fighting game, because Requin Cobalt is making like imagining their own and posted their progress in it through GIFs and all that, they animate as well. Where if you're designing your own fighting game, you kind of want to have a reference, an idea of how the character moves, what kind of kicks would they use, what would they punch with, do they use magic, how would they move to use that magic. And this is where Requin really shines with their work, not only with how obviously the character moves, but also like what kind of effects happen when they fire. And they have like so many of these that are all like individually unique to each character that they make, and that's just a very nice thing to have for something like RWBY, for example, to bring up like Nora, like how everyone loves that Nora fires these grenades with the hearts on them, and when they explode they leave like pink heart explosions. And this is exactly the kind of thing that an artist like Requin Cobalt would illustrate and conceptualize to make it fit that character's concept as much as possible. So then now to the mechanical design. My first choice for all the weapon designs for my RWBY Dream Team would be Hero Medley, or POW, that's their nickname as well. I've really enjoyed Hero Medley's work over the years. I glaze them whenever I can because they're kind of like one of the very few artists that I know that really whose entire thing is just making these really cool hybrid multi-mode weapons. And I would recruit them within a heartbeat without hesitation. Their work is very intricate, and their weapons just suit a RWBY style very well, like probably in kind of like a very suitable way that's also like kind of updated look as well, I would say. And the interesting fact is that Hero Medley is not even that familiar with RWBY. I mean, they know about it, but from talking with him, I know that he didn't really know much about RWBY while doing all this. So it'd be very interesting and beneficial to kind of bring someone who has an outside perspective in regards to RWBY, but still like fundamentally just understands the kind of shape language and designs that will complement the series perfectly. And that's the kind of people.
Nuts. I always assumed they were like a big RWBY fan for like the design things they include, like the three little dots, like the way they also have like the bladed weapons, like the style of it in relation to the gun and the weapon.
Yeah, no, I was surprised too. Like, I think the extent of their knowledge of RWBY is just like RWBY and WISE, and that's it, which is very interesting to learn.
Well, they've got the basics down then.
I mean, yeah, yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I like this one in particular because this was honing in on what I mentioned earlier about like accessorizing and showing individuality and how to decorate the weapons, and just adds a lot of nice visual flair to it.
It's very interesting to see, like, that sticker thing has really piqued my brain. It really does feel like these characters were all written by 20 to 30-year-old men from Texas who don't know what young women like. I'm not trying to say all women like stickers and like sparkles and Barbies, but I'm like, wait, they are young girls, aren't they? Holy shit, I keep forgetting that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, famously, you redesigned like Ruby's room, right? Because you were like, this is not a teenage girl's room.
I know. I love
Yeah,
that.
like put some Grim toys on the shelf. Like kids love toys, right?
Well, she has the Grimm statues, but they're like, there is like a very lack of detail or personality in the room.
Yeah. Understandable given the technical limitations, but very missed opportunity.
Actually, no, I'll fight against that. No, it's not that
Yeah,
hard
I was
to
gonna
No.
be like,
No,
I
you
can
could
do
have
it
You
with
should-
a
PNG of like
program.
fairy lights. You could absolutely do it. Yeah.
you should have locked in.
Rooms are not cubes. Look at the room you're in right now. Unless you're in a weird place, your room is not a cube.
Yeah. Okay.
There are different proportions, different sizes, different things, posters, shapes, all that kind of stuff. They literally had a rectangle. They had a perfectly square room with 2 beds that are color coordinated. I'm like,
Well-
guys, you're not even trying yet.
Well, they
If
tried.
there's a limitation, it is rather time and a lack of priority. They probably just decided that's not super important.
Yeah.
But
We got bigger
they were
fish to
wrong.
fry.
I mean, they tried for the dorm room at least.
No, that's a perfect example of it done right.
Yeah.
That they then never replicated anywhere else. It was like, oh, this is highly expressive. Let's never do that again.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be surprised at how much it helps, because everyone still memes like the double-decker beds with like the books holding it up until now.
Yeah.
So
There's not that this is getting off topic, but there is a reason outside of the finger quotes golden era that people keep going back to Beacon. Can anyone think of a room that they liked post Volume 3?
I can think of a few rooms that I hate with all my soul.
It's everything with any soul, and I don't mean that to insult the people. They were just told to make shit, but like this is getting wildly off topic. So sorry.
The vaults are nice.
Good. I will grant you that.
And actually, what little we saw of Atlas Academy was, I think, really nice too. If they actually bothered to explore it.
Me and me shoot each other in head in like, you wasted it. You wasted it.
Those dorms, dude. Those dorms in Atlas. Oh
The library, they designed that library. It's so
yeah,
good.
there's
Yeah.
this beautiful concept of the library for Atlas, and it's just like, and we never see it.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but it's so pretty.
Because, like, for what little we saw in what was supposed to be like a very kind of structured, rigid kingdom, it did look interesting, which is, I think, an accomplishment.
And the dorm bedrooms look like a submarine. Like, I
Yeah.
just can't understand its own language.
I mean, I guess it's supposed to be like very military.
Yeah, but like, no. And we won't go into that. Just like, they
Alright.
were wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay. Won't argue that. So next for
On the
that.
record, get in the comments.
That's not my job to clean up. So
It's your job to enjoy the engagement.
yeah, and I guess if I'm gonna harp on things, I don't know if I'll like cut this part out later. Like, this is kind of what we should be doing for like a Blake weapon, and not just like one tiny mustard strip on her sword that no one
Yeah.
notices. This is how much you should be leaning into it if you're gonna do like the whole kintsugi thing for Blake's weapon after it got broken.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, it is an odd choice because blades are supposed to be one continuous piece of metal. But in this case, it feels less like kintsugi and more like magma. Like there's an elemental aspect
Yeah.
going on with this blade that I'm really enjoying.
Yeah, and for if it's in service of making something cool, then I can close one.
Yeah,
eye
if
to
it's cool enough, you forget that it's stupid. 100%.
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
that's what the rule of cool really is, I think. If it's cool enough, you forget that it's stupid. I think that's like the definition of the rule of cool.
oh
In
yeah,
the dictionary right now.
oh yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention about the whole being tactile thing and how weapons and technology should have like the buttons and things. while composing that slide, my mind was just entirely on the fact that Raven's sword always had like a gun trigger on it, and I'll always be sore that nothing ever is done about it. I will always bring it up.
About Fixing RWBY. We shouldn't talk about it. It's our
Okay.
own side project. But there was one guy in Fixing RWBY who said, like, well, what if it was a minigun that shoots swords? And we did it. And you cannot
And
convince me
Cino,
that
he
that
cooked.
wasn't the plan. That was that it has to be a minigun that shoots swords, and he never told anyone, or they just forgot. It's a Gatling gun that shoots swords.
It's sword,
Fight me.
100%.
Yeah, and it could be
Cino,
that.
Cino Bike. That was the guy that figured it out in for our project, Fixing RWBY.
Yeah, it could be that in addition to like when she's holding the sword, she could probably like press the trigger and it'll probably activate the dust, so we like light the sword on fire or make it like a wind sword, something like that. So yeah, I will forever hold a grudge for
It
that.
even has what looks like a muzzle on the other end that would make it just work. It was designed to fire swords. Fight me in the comments. I'll be outside of school at 3 o'clock.
Excellent. So moving on from this section, I mean we're still in the same section, which is technology, and that's so next is Kendera. Kendera, specifically their style of design is more into very sleek shapes and oh no, this is a different artist, into sleek shapes and prosthetics specifically, and kind of what I really love about their art and their design is kind of how much they think about implementing technology into the character design itself. So obviously, you know, the most clear example we can use is like Yang for prosthetics, but you know, if we were to, you know, exercise the same amount of care into like the whole hunters as a concept, then obviously in a world like this where people are fighting these monsters all the time, it's such a golden opportunity to introduce so many different types of characters with prosthetics or cybernetic limbs in like in a near future setting like RWBY's, and how they would use that to fight. And also an additional thing about the art I really enjoy is the kind of, I don't know how I would put this, but it's just very like, there's something very consumer or very sporty about their designs that feels like it's something that you can like probably buy or access in the world that this design exists in. It's like it makes you think
It's
about
not made by a secret general in an underground base given only out to the one character that happens to be a protagonist. Like, I know exactly what you mean. I really
Yeah,
like that.
it's product design. It's like it's graphics design. It's like
yeah product
this is a
design.
thing that it is being advertised for. Is a thing you can acquire.
Yeah.
It's funny how you pique my brain with stuff like that, because like the minute that you started talking about like other hunters and prosthetics, I'm like, not the any way the same kind of direction, but there's a scene in the Starship Troopers movie where to emphasize the horrors of war, one guy, when being signed up, is happily greeted by the recruiter and says, "I'm glad you're joining. The mobile infantry made me the man I am today." And he wheels out from behind the desk. He has no legs and he's got like a prosthetics. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Maybe the aspect of like, holy shit, they're fighting monsters should be that could be a direction that you take Yang. Like, she's beauty, but she's sacrificing beauty. You can just do stuff with that I just think is neat.
Yeah, and not to throw too much shade on Pietro, I mean, his chair is kind of cool, but it's like that thing is not fitting in any doorway or room.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of practicality. It's like I feel like you could have designed it so that the legs unfurled from like it was like a wheel and then could unfurl into legs for different scenarios.
Or
feels like it
you have
lacks
to
a
pay
certain
it
amount of
off.
practicality to it.
Or you have to pay it off, and like its impracticality becomes rule of cool, and you circle back round, and he basically has a Tachikoma scene from Ghost in a Shell, where he's essentially a not violent killing machine, but you can understand the idea of what I'm talking about. Where
it's so.
Is it
you
Maria
circle
fighting
back
Neo in the mech? Maybe it was
Yeah.
Pietro. That would have been sick.
like they're just it's execution. That really comes down to what we're talking about. It's execution, and these people shouldn't be. Sorry.
You gotta cut them.
I think the audio glitched there, so it be left up to interpretation. Yeah. But yeah,
No, 100%. Execute. Making sure also that people have the time and the effort and the consideration to put in that execution too.
and the pay. I forget that.
Yeah. Because there's a crazy amount of talented people who have worked on RWBY, and it unfortunately doesn't always show in the end product.
Yeah, man does not live by brisket and pizza dinners alone. But yeah, I still want to emphasize this because I also find it like it's just something like really fun about like how I mentioned that it feels like something you can kind of buy or obtain in the real world or 3D print or whatever, because it just like opens up the door for like so much world building you can do in the world of RWBY without even necessarily explaining it, because you know, in a world where there's all these hunters people constantly hurting themselves, getting limbs missing from fighting these a constant wave of monsters all the time, you know, why wouldn't there be like companies or like corporations directly involved with making things like this? Because we only ever see like the Shiny Dust Company, and that's for dust, you know, it's for an aspect of the world. But then why don't we get to see like what's like the big weapons manufacturing company in Remnant, like who's making all the transforming weapons? Like, you know, yeah, the students forge it themselves somehow, but you know, someone's got to make the parts and all that, and maybe some would mass produce them, and you know, the prosthetics kind of fall into that aspect of world building as well.
I feel like you could just slap a Just Do It logo on the right poster. Just like fit right there at the bottom left.
Yeah, like Just Hunted or whatever it is.
Oh, that's so cringe that I would they should do that.
Yeah.
That is terrible.
It's on the
That is
same
great.
yeah, it's on the same level as Weapons magazine, so it fits. But yeah, so then another artist I would love to highlight is Mimic Mango. So they are largely a pixel animator, but I've recently discovered their work and really enjoyed it as well, because the animations are one thing, they're all very nice, but the ideas are just like I cannot imagine how I could come up with stuff like this. Just the kind of concepts they have are really fun and creative. Like this one is like a kind of grenade launcher hand that shoots it out of a finger, and then this one is like a little briefcase that shoots out into a tripod cannon. This one's like a bike that falls out into a spider tank. This one is like a pair of wings that a pair of metal wings that the character wears around them, but it doesn't just become a jetpack, it becomes like an entire flying drone that can do like a remote orbital strike on someone from far away. And you know, I would just love to have someone whose brain is this cracked to like just like whose job is just to sit there and come up with like batshit crazy ideas like this for RWBY all day, and then just see.
In this hypothetical project, I'm stealing this person and we're going to make video games for RWBY. Like, they don't get to see sunlight.
Yeah.
You're in those DMs already. There's a project. being
Exactly. Yeah. So that's Mango. Really excellent. There's a lot more where this came from. It's very, also very fan servicey. So careful where you tread. But that adds to the appeal, in my opinion. Next is ZiyueChen. So this one is a fairly prolific artist, I believe. It's a professional Japanese artist, but I really enjoy like the kind of mechanical work they do, the shapes, and just the way they design the kind of blockiness, the shapes of their tech that I feel would help determine that direction for the way that RWBY's tech looks, not just in like things like military vehicles. So like this could be like a design for a hypothetical redesigned paladin, but kind of carrying this shape language overall to like what the weapons and like the tech in the world will look like, because as we said, like how we kind of want to pay more attention to how the world of RWBY is portrayed visually, that we also would need to consider, like if, like, let's say if the Shiny Dust Company also had a division called Shiny Robotics, what would a Shiny Robotics robot look like? The Adlesian Knights, the Adlesian Paladin, what kind of design language would they follow? It's not just as simple as saying, oh, Atlas is like white and black, so all the robots are white and black. That's obviously you have to think about how blocky they look, how sleek do they look, what kind of weapons and all that do they use.
It loops again back into the consistency thing. So having someone as a mechanical designer would be very good, because one of our biggest bugbears is the complete disconnect between Cordovan's giant robot and every other robot we've seen the entire show.
Yes.
And even there's no cohesion to the design. It's not possible just to keep cohesion. It's just not. It's just very strange.
Yeah, the way that Cordovan's mech look, it makes you want to, if you're being charitable, it makes you want to think that, oh, this is like an old prototype kind of mech from before they modernized it. But that is entirely headcanon. You have to make up to justify what is probably just a lack of foresight in the design stage.
The shape language is just too different. There's no, like, again, I'm not. It sounds like I'm being real harsh, but this is just more like outline what your dream team would be able to identify and not have. Is there's nothing wrong specifically with the design of that mech. It is just clearly not. Famously, the Paladin is actually a bought asset, and that's fine as well. Buying assets is fine, but when they decided to build their own, there was just no forethought given to these things need to cohesively exist in the same world. You could even say if it was built by Vacuo, that would have been fine. But like, these are built by the same people. This is both Legion designs, and they're not. And it's a big problem with their design language.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that you'll find in other series there will be different different brands, different companies, different manufacturers and stuff, and you will see that kind of pattern and consistency across their own brands, but then also in the larger picture of the world. And you're not quite having that with Cordovan's mech across every other like iterations of, like, let's say the Spider Drone and like the Paladins and all that.
Yeah,
weirdly, the Spider Drone and the Paladin go together in a way that feels like they're very different but connected. We never see the Spider Drone again, but the point being, they do exist in this hearse-shaped mechanical world that the Paladins exist in and the Knights sort of exist in as well. But that round iron giant, stumpy-legged thing, just it's from a different universe, not just a different country or a different group of people. It's not. Robots don't work that way in the RWBY world compared to every other robot we've seen.
And again, fantastic art, very skillful, concepted and modeled thing. It doesn't fit.
Yeah, but why was it brown? That's the worst part. Why did they
yeah.
did it with that one flying cargo ship that Weiss escapes in? Like, everything else.
That one's also really bad.
Yeah,
it's just design and then color choices.
Like,
you don't know.
Yeah, like, I don't know how, like, I mean, obviously you know how like the bullheads and the ships and airships in Volume 1 and all that look like, and even Volume 4. And then to have like Mistral flying like these weird fantasy looking skiffs out of like Tatooine or something with like the...
They needed some garbling or something. They needed to pretty them up somehow.
Yeah, I mean...
It goes again into that, again, I keep bringing it back to consistency. They've got a generic Asia land intermixed with like hyper-futurism and then like sci-fi futurism Europe. And like, they've just got, and these people live in Chinese villages from the 14th century. I'm like, what?
Even specifically, it is like almost entirely like East Asian. So they're grabbing from like very few, like very particularly like 3 cultures pretty much.
Yeah, and not even in,
it is funky.
And not even like in the right time period that should work for RWBY, because they could obviously have done like more of like, you know, the like those kind of busy Hong Kong streets kind of vibe for Mistral.
Oh god, yeah, Hong Kong. It should have looked exactly like, what's that famous city that was in China that they had to knock down? That was just the most dense place on the planet. There's a very famous series of photographs taken by the BBC about this. It essentially was a living cube of people. It was insane. If you ever look it up, it's an amazing.
Flash images if we find them here.
if I know what it's called by the end of this, but yeah.
If we find it.
Yeah.
If not, the comments will tell us.
Yeah, it's on you.
Check the comments below. Leave an incorrect answer below.
Alright, and I think that's it for mechanicals. And then next should be creature designs, which I'm quite excited about because there is... Oh, no, not yet. Environments are next. So, one person I would get... This was a bit of a more last-minute addition because myself, I'm simply just not well-versed enough in environment artists. You know, I could obviously just pick someone just for the sake of putting them here, but then I wouldn't like kind of accurately represent what I would kind of want for like a RWBY thing. But I managed to luck out with 2 choices from artists that I followed, and one is Arctic Cave. They did do art for like Arknights and stuff, and this is, I believe, from Alchemy Stars, which is another game. But just from vibes alone, like this obviously has a very Atlas vibe, this has a very Veil vibe to it, so I can kind of easily imagine them designing architecture and spaces that fit these. And then to put on 2 more examples, they are also very good at like this kind of more technological cityscapes. Obviously if we're leaning more into the whole near modern future thing, we definitely need like cityscapes like this, and just to kind of, I don't know, like go more hard into like the kind of larger than life world that RWBY could be. I mean, it just feels cooler. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of that. And this is Arctic Cave is who I would get for more of the architectural city design aspect of it, while this next artist, Zhao-P, another artist that I followed for a very long time, who I admire, I would get them for more of like the non-mechanical aspects, so like things like the wilderness of RWBY's world, things like the vaults. This is a very vault-esque illustration that could be used for like like the relics, things that communicate the more so while this is more like the hard mechanical side of RWBY's world, this represents like the more soft, magical, mystical, undiscovered parts of RWBY's world. And just to hear more examples, and I just really love their use of colors, especially to set like to kind of really like sell the differentness of RWBY's world, because we all miss Forever Fall, I'm sure, and this is a great example of how utilize the unique colors to showcase RWBY's world. So then next is the creature design, and one pair of artists that I would love to, who I think are kind of like undisputed for my choice, is Tetramera. So Tetramera are an artist duo, so they're 2 friends named Sin and Mei, and just looking through the Tumblr, I've just really enjoyed their monster designs. It's kind of, obviously you can see that kind of stylized and a bit cartoonish, but still looks very cool, very intimidating, scary, even grotesque. And there's just such a nice variety of creature designs that are equally scary and cool that I think would work really well as concept art for Grimm. Here's like a whole spread of extra art that both of them have done between the 2 of them. Big old whale, we all know that's a Grimm whale, so the way these 2 artists draw monsters is very scratches my brain a lot, and I would love for them to be like a principal Grimm designer on like a RWBY production. And then another bonus edition artist is Liue, who also I really like their kind of the monsters they draw. Maybe the tone of these designs are a bit like more darker than what I would get for RWBY specifically, but maybe if it's like a RWBY spin-off, more like a dark fantasy vibe, then I can very clearly imagine like a Beowulf or other types of Grimm with like these more grotesque Dark Souls-y designs to them.
Well, I think you do need someone to like who is willing to push the limits on it. You don't always want you definitely want people to go wild in the concept art phasing, so you can kind of narrow it down to what you like really want for your for specific Grimm or monster designs.
Yeah, for sure.
And you need crazy people that go way too far that we just pull back on. You just say like you have someone's like no, and you need you need crazy people who go way too hard that you just pull back a bit and go like we can't do exactly that, but let's take elements of that. You don't want just like cookie cutter teddy bear creating people. Like you want some stuff that's way too sick to be used, but let's use bits of it.
Yeah, which is why it's like the same principle of like the character designs, how we're going to mix different styles in there to really get a full range of what the characters could look like, then narrow it down. So next is chibi artists. So I have 3 choices for chibi artists here, and they all kind of share like a similar style that I like, that I can kind of clearly imagine in my brain. my little brain that how like if Viz would like make like things like social media, things like RWBY emojis, RWBY comics to post on social media and all that, what kind of style those characters would take. And I'm imagining like these very kind of rounded faces, obviously very colorful as well. So this is Nai, which is one of them. Another one is Surim, who's another chibi artist. This one is more of like a line art, pencil-y look to them. And another is that Wang. That one specifically I find interesting because outside of the chibi art, they actually draw a lot of cars. That's their special interest. They do a lot of vehicles. Not to say like get them as a vehicle concept artist or anything. I mean that'd be nice, but it's more like their special eye for like things like technology and implementing that in like the daily lives of people. I think that would be also very fun as like a chibi artist to kind of involve that in like the various promotional art that RWBY could have. And from there, we get into illustrators. So again, like I said, illustrators are those who kind of draw like the official art, right? So they're not necessarily designing the characters or figuring out all the pre-production stuff. They're kind of the ones illustrating like the main stuff, the posters, the covers, things like that. And one of my first choices is Lavelis. So Lavelis, they kind of have like a anime western fusion style. This is the one choice I picked who is kind of very adjacent in style to like Iron Lee and Erin Wynn, with the kind of colorful semi-painted style and the expressiveness. I feel they kind of be very suitable for RWBY in terms of like capturing the kind of similar art style that people are familiar with, but it's someone different, so they kind of offer something new to the table. Next is Quo, who's another illustrator, and specifically want to highlight why I like them is because of just the very like nice colors that they use, very interesting color palettes, and just the kind of focus on like the casual wear and the more kind of casualness of their illustrations, but also very like pop art and graphical nature of it would suit very well with the kind of modern RWBY that I'm imagining. That's kind of has a more modernized, updated art style with the focus on those kind of graphics. And the next is Yutsu, another illustrator. So I picked them because their posing is very dynamic. They have a very kind of loose, expressive style in posing that I really like. That would be interesting to see with RWBY characters. And Yiwen, who is has more of like a kind of cute chibi-ish style. Again, I really love their use of very bright colors, and I think you will find that a common denominator with all of these illustrators I'm highlighting is the fact that all their styles are very colorful, which is something that I really kind of want to hammer home for something like RWBY, because I think given what I mentioned like a while back with the previous stream about how like everyone with the Marvel thing, that how after Marvel Tokon and Marvel Rivals that suddenly brought out these super colorful and expressive character designs, that suddenly everyone became interested in Marvel again. I think it's kind of something that you can apply to RWBY too, because RWBY, where it last left off, it's kind of this weird medium between I don't know if you want to call it gritty, but a more muted color tones compared to like earlier volumes where the colors are a bit more bleached out. They're not as vibrant as they were with, let's say, something as early as the trailers, where the colors were like in your face. They were more like sharply in the forefront, the colors. So I definitely want to like kind of bring that again and have a resurgence of that style with these choices of illustrators who really want to emphasize the colors and really lean into the color aspect of RWBY. And that's I think all. Oh, another illustrator is Lata, another really cool illustrator that I've followed for a very long time. They also have very good posing. They use a lot of foreshortening, which I really like with their illustrations, and really no other notes here. I just really admire and like this stuff for a long time, and I think be really suitable for something like RWBY as well. And then we're getting into the final section of here, which is the collab artists. So these are kind of more you can say high profile artists that if I was running this RWBY production, I would approach them for guest art for specific nice illustrations or designs. And Yuji Fantasia is again another favorite artist of mine. They've of course done RWBY art in the past and here and there as well, but now they mostly work on Arcanites and other properties, and just a very beautiful art style. I would love to have them as a regular doing collab art for RWBY. Definitely give them a follow. Neko, who is probably one of the OG big weapon porn artists that I followed back in the day. They're still at it to now, pretty much one of the OGs, and I would definitely get them for figures. So they mainly just deal with, they kind of just make these dope ass designs, and then later they get like figure deals to kind of make 3D figures of those character designs. And I would like love it if just to see like what his take on a RWBY character will be with like a redesigned weapon, and then just like make it into a figure that people can buy. That would be dope. Just really nice designs overall. Rotak, another artist that I follow, really like their work. Just really interesting designs. They have very strange organic shapes in their designs. It has a very like organic, almost organ-like look with them. I just really like their style. I think maybe not even necessarily for RWBY, I just like them a lot. Really nice use of colors. Ryota-H, another high-profile artist. I kind of view them with the same admiration as Shiro Miwa, one of my goats. They kind of have the same very expressive, dynamic character proportions and posing. And 7Zell. 7Zell, I believe, has done work for, I guess, Pokemon. They've done work for Pokemon. But I just really enjoyed their urban aesthetic that they apply to their style. So kind of pop art, really like modern urban art style that I really love. That is kind of what I really would think would be interesting if it would be leaned into more. Because obviously I'm speaking out of like some influence from ZZZ, which also lean into those elements. But I think at least seeing like an illustration or two of kind of RWBY in that very like kind of modernized urban art style would be really interesting, especially for all like the really cool graffiti-esque text elements and things like that. Like a variety of RWBY logos would also be super cool to look at in different fonts and typographic styles. But I believe that's the last artist in that showcase and the end of this slideshow. At long last.
You could feel the time on that.
Yeah. Alright. So now is the time for concluding thoughts, gather all our collected thoughts about everything, and just it's the free open table, so to speak, for you guys to take over.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like all the artists you had on here. I followed some of them, and I'm gonna follow some more of them. They're all really neat. I like the concept of this sideshow also. I remember you had jokingly said it's like this dream team, and I was like, all right, bet. It was on your list, and you were like, well, I hadn't actually thought about it.
Yeah.
And then you got your brainworm about it, and you were like, actually, I need to make a slideshow. And it ended up being 99 pages.
Yes.
99 slides long.
That's ADHD for you.
But boy, is it like a fun exploration of like not just what RWBY is stylistically, a bit narratively as like a media property, but it's also just like a fun exploration of like art and like a theoretical way where art like RWBY could go. It's like injecting not just like fandom artists or artists that you admire, but like injecting people you think would help RWBY grow stylistically and like where you would like to see it grow. It's kind of like not a perspective I hear a lot. You hear a lot of like trying to recapture the old look of RWBY or the old feel, and me and Jay are like subject to that also. We have our little like our RWBY models that are definitely a riff off the original Poser era style. That themselves have like grown into its own kind of like furthering of those ideas. But it's really nice to see like hey, what's the future of RWBY rather than what is the past and what is the current. Even though we did end up talking a lot about both those things in the process.
Yeah.
Well, you've got to know where you've come from to know where you're going, and that's what I really like. I like the idea of just not critically examining the past, but without like a condescending eye or a you should have done it this way or should have done it that way. It's more of a broad strokes about like here are some things that I identified that are RWBY or that like maybe RWBY's lost, and it's very possible to bring back. It's very the whole talk's been about this concept of, well, VIZ has spent like what was it, 26 million or I don't know how much it was to buy it. RWBY's not dead. And what they decide to do with it is really up to them. And the idea that it's not creatively bankrupt, it's not even close. Like it's not like a dead thing. It's only just needs some direction. And the idea of rather than pining about the past or desperately standing parts that you think are better or worse or whatever, it's like, hey, here are the things that I think could be done, could be improved. I think it was a really good talk actually, and identifying different artists and stuff like that. Even if you don't get those exact people. It's identifying the concept of what going forward could look like. One of the very few people that even acknowledge the idea that there could be more than just the next season, is even if it is just the next season, but what is that next season? What does it do? What does it set up? I don't think VIZ wants to bought a property to make a conclusion to RWBY. Like, even if you really like RWBY a lot, you got to admit that would be a very odd and silly business case for them to buy it to finish 1, 2, or 3 seasons of a show.
Yeah, I mean,
they obviously want to do something with it, and
VIZ is not
done, it's not finished.
Yeah, VIZ is not a Make-A-Wish foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think also why I did it is I think that I think understandably a lot of RWBY fans are kind of pessimistic or clinging to what they have with RWBY now, pessimistic in the sense that, even after VIZ bought it, they're not hopeful about where the series could go in terms of like, especially with a certain subset of fans that after Volume 10 is kind of soft confirmed, it kind of sealed the deal for them that it's just going to be more of the same. And fans who also want like a conclusion to the story and more of the RWBY that they're familiar with. And I just really made this slideshow with the intent of not only showing how like RWBY as an idea, as a concept, as RWBY as a big picture could evolve even now or 5 years from now, but also in a way because I am something of a dreamer, to give some sort of hope to fans that if done well or done with deliberate intent, RWBY can be a lot more, and a lot more interesting, a lot more fantastical, a lot more cool and fun that we can kind of even imagine while still being RWBY. And even if that doesn't happen, that's still fine, because that doesn't take away the RWBY that we have, and it doesn't take away from what we like about it and what we kind of picture it to be as well.
I think RWBY's greatest achievement is not anything even within the show itself. It's this idea that there's quite a lot of modern Western indie animation that in some ways has a tiny little connection to it. It's art that's made people create art, whether it's just from the idea of, oh, I could do better than that, or I really like this, or I want to try animation, or I saw that cool video years ago and I got interested in animation. Like, there's a series of very small connecting threads between this little independent Texas-based early 3D anime and quite a lot of global creativity, and that's something special and worthy of at least talking about and seeing if there's anything more to wring out of that nice little sponge that is this really weird online anime thing.
Yeah, and RWBY may, in the grand scheme of things, just be a small fish in a small pond, but the ripples it made are still felt today by some people, and some of those people are now in the industry working. So it's not like it didn't have any impact at all. And I think that even if there were negative things that happened, I think that overall I'm still glad that RWBY exists, and I'm glad that I'm a fan of it, and largely because of my brain through without my consent. But it's just I just really like thinking about it, and this was really fun. I guess any closing words to the viewers you guys would like to opine?
No, support your local artists slash favorite artists.
I can't think of anything funny to say.
Uh,
Eat your vegetables.
Intensely relevant political commentary.
No, that's for the irrelevant
Here's my
election side
thoughts
plot.
on
We
the-
don't
never mind.
I felt where that was going. I felt where that.
Yeah.
DM me what you think I was gonna say, Coffee. Please edit all this out. I think we are winding up.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Bye, everyone.